guys, my name's Jo. I'm the CEO of NaviStar Legal, and today I have Ashley Osborne from Deval PropTech. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, today we are talking a little bit about the property market, talking about how things are going to be in the future, and finding out a little bit about Ashley's experience as a business owner. So thanks for joining us. Ashley, tell us your background. What do you do? Tell us a little bit about you.
I've always worked in the residential and real estate markets. I'm actually Australian originally. I've spent actually most of my working career in Asia. So after finishing my degree in Australia, I moved to the UK for a brief period of time, but spent most of my working career in Hong Kong and Singapore, where I was involved with a number of large commercial companies rolling out their platforms of offices and industrial space. And I've spent about 10 years living in Asia. At a point in time, I was working at Colliers International and moved across from the commercial space to set up their international sales business within the residential development market. And we were quite successful in that space. And I've moved across recently with Colliers in the last 5 years to help them set up a domestic market for the residential business. But more recently, I've left the business and gone to set up my own business, Deval PropTech, with a business partner and some colleagues that I've worked with in the past.
How are you finding being a business owner? What's the difference for you?
I think the biggest difference for me has been that you probably take for granted a lot of the infrastructure and systems that are existing in place when you work for a large multinational company. So some of the challenges aren't around what we're going to do or how we're going to approach the market. Those sorts of things are relatively obvious. It's more about how do you make email work and, where your office is going to be and, how do employment contracts work. It's those sorts of day-to-day things which are far more complex than perhaps you imagine. But also, I think it's a really interesting space. It's a lot more dynamic. Things happen a lot quicker. And I think one of the things that we've been saying within our group is we're able to make decisions and execute on decisions really, really quickly. Whereas historically, say, our business is very much based on tech and technology. We've managed to set up a sort of a new website within sort of 6 months. It does quite a lot of things. If I was still in the corporate world, that probably would have been a sort of 2 to 3 year project.
Yeah, it is a different world, isn't it? And it's strange how much you bring from the corporate world into the SME world, or that you take advantage, but not take advantage, but take for granted when you're in the corporate world. Yeah, like email systems. It seems like a really simple thing. Of course, you just get an email system, but then there becomes the conversation. Do I need Teams or can I use Google? Those are little things.
That's right. It's all those sorts of day-to-day things that you just don't recognize that are part of that corporate infrastructure.
How have you found your attitude to risk changing, coming from corporate and going in? You say you're making kind of quick decisions. Are you making quick decisions? Is it more risky? Like, how are you dealing with risk at the moment?
Look, I mean, by the very nature of what I've done, I've left a sort of a very, very large company where I was quite a senior person at a global level in the role that I did. To go and start my own business. So our attitude to risk is actually quite high. But I would say we quite like that risk because I think we've all got to a point in our careers where we look at risk in a different way. We're not sort of, we're all in a fortunate position where we're not trying to save money to buy a house or put our children through school. It's about taking sensible risk. And, obviously the rewards are far greater as well. If those risks pay off.
Yeah, so it's kind of risk and reward, isn't it?
Absolutely. And as much as you can, the financial rewards in some of those corporate world is quite high. The reality is, and I think the things you start seeing is the multipliers and the return you're able to generate from your own business, particularly when you're an owner like I am, is so much higher. And that has its advantages as well.
It's almost, the cap is off, isn't it? The cap is off in terms of your employee, in terms of the money, the take home, employment. What you could gain from it is the cap is off. I mean, I guess it's capped to some degree because you're a small business, but it's still could potentially be unlimited.
Yeah, and
yeah, go on.
it's also those, it's not just the financial rewards, I think it's the rewards with time as well, because suddenly you own your own time in a completely different way. So, if I've got a very different working day to probably most people. I would typically start work at sort of 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, but I generally finish at sort of 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I've got a young family, so I like to spend my time with them in the afternoons. And it's much easier to do those things where, there's not an expectation that you're going to be at your desk for a certain period of time just because you're there to keep everybody else there. What you tend to find, well, I've found certainly with this process, is that we've attracted a lot of people to come and work for us, and they've actually come to work for us because they like the idea and they believe in the concept. So, nobody's sort of checking with anybody to see that you're working every day, or, we don't have, particularly in the current crisis, we don't have sort of daily calls to make sure everybody's working. There's an expectation that everybody's just getting on with what they're doing because that's what they want to do. So it's been very interesting from that perspective.
That's interesting. When I said, how are you doing? You're like, we're just getting on with it. Just getting on with it. That's all you can do at this moment. How have things changed? Because you're about to launch. Like you were, when we first connected, you were like, oh, we're going to launch. What's happening with that? And why don't you tell me a little bit about what you're doing business-wise, what your plans are and how they've changed? I'm curious.
I think when I left Colliers, we weren't quite clear, or I wasn't quite clear on exactly what I wanted to do. But I knew that it was to use technology to change the way that the market worked in the residential space. Because I think, most people would recognize that the residential and the property business is very slow moving. I think what this current crisis has done is really crystallized within our minds exactly what it is we can do, which is our business is all about taking risk and allocating a price to that risk, and making sure that different participants that take on that risk are fairly rewarded for the risk that they're taking, which is not actually something that happens in the new build residential development space. I think because of the current crisis, we've actually made the decision to accelerate what we're doing because we think that the world will be a very different place post coronavirus. And we think that the change in balance between East and West, and they're two markets that I'm really familiar with, I've probably spent more time working in Asia than anywhere else, will change. So we really want to capitalize on that, but we want to do it in a way that's meaningful, but also helps the housing market as well, because we recognize there's no point in setting up a company that doesn't add additional value to the market over and above what other companies might do. So the traditional property agency would be to maximize pricing and to use very, very expensive marketing tools to promote projects, and buyers take on those costs and that are absorbed in the prices that they pay. And for the developer and for the buyer, there's no real advantage in all of those costs. What we seek to do is use that new technology to reduce the costs and to pass on those savings to investors. So, some would say our project is quite timely in terms of what we're doing. And I think because we recognize that as we come out, things will be different, we really want to make sure that we're there in the market as things change and the markets come back, because we want to be there with a new offering. So where we were previously thinking we might go to market sort of late this year, early next year, we've actually turned everything on its head and we've said, actually, we need to be ready to go to market by the 1st of July. So that has been the big change in our.
How did that feel, making that decision?
I suspect that, both, I've got a business partner who's based in New Zealand who owns his own company, and we've come together to develop it. We're both quite energetic people by nature. So I suspect we were always going to try and push things forward. From our perspective, it's two people that come from a very property-centric background that are trying to understand technology and how that works within our market. So in many ways, it was the technology that held us back. I think it's been more trying to understand what the technology is and how we can use it to our advantage that was the thing that slowed us down. And I think it's just focused our mind. It's mean that we've had to really get focused on what we were doing, because we see that there's quite a significant opportunity. And, you know, like all things with risk, if you're not in the room, you're not in the deal, and you can't be in the room unless you've got a product to offer. So it was all about those sorts of things. It was almost inevitable, I think.
Yeah, you guys, I mean, when we spoke, it was kind of early in the crisis, and you've made some really quick decisions in a very short period of time to just go, right, we're moving now, that's it. And are there any tools, values, or beliefs, things that you kind of hold to be self-evident when it comes to challenging times, when it comes to something difficult that's going on, or any things or routines that you're like, I have to do this, and in these sorts of environments, this is what I need to do?
Do you know what? I think actually there are, and I think they all sort of, I recognise it from Colliers as well, because I would say my role within Colliers was to be a corporate entrepreneur. I was there to set up new business lines and do different things. So, I think this is not dissimilar to lots of scenarios. There's no sort of magic silver bullet. It's about the collection of getting there, doing the work, and slowly chipping away at it. And I'm actually writing a book at the same time at the moment, and it's almost, it's all about, getting up in the morning, being focused for the time that you're working, and just getting, it's almost like you want to move the weight from A to B, and it doesn't matter how far Z is, as long as you get it to B. When you turn around when you're D, you can go, oh, actually, we've gone quite a long way. And I think progress isn't something that you recognize when you're looking forward. It's when you look backwards and you go, oh my God, we've achieved quite a lot in the period of time that we've done. So, my whole thing is really stripping out all of the things that aren't important. So, it was really sort of drilling down, well, actually, what do we need to be able to do by a given point in time? And what are the sort of minimum requirements? And, recognizing that we want to launch a website. The website will do certain things. There's more things that we'd like it to do, but what is it that we need it to do the day that we go to market? And what other materials or products or infrastructure do we need on day one when we're in the public saying, we are a business, we're live, we're open for business, and this is what we do. And I think that really focuses your mind, and then you sort of work backwards from there. And that's certainly the process we've been through.
I'm keen to understand the message of this book from somebody who wakes up at 4 a.m. Like, I was thinking of Tim Ferriss, the 4-hour work week. And I was thinking yours would be something like the 4 a.m. work day.
No, mine's very much focused on, the concept behind our business is about how real estate development works and how the risks are associated. So right. It doesn't have a name at the moment, but it's all really based on how a real estate development works, because I don't think people genuinely understand that. And where is the risk? And for me, with that negotiation for the buyer, between the buyer and the developer, the reality is there's no sort of Trump moment where somebody walks in and just agrees a deal. The reality is the deal is created because that investor is able to shoulder some of the risk that the developer is taking, or better understands the risk. And for me, the book is all about explaining how that process works, so people that want to buy have a far better understanding of how it works and how they can help mitigate the risk of a developer and therefore benefit from it.
You were explaining that to me earlier, the fact that if you've got it, because I don't know developments too well, but that when people are buying a development, there's a piece of that development that can enable, once that first element, that first part of the development has been purchased, that allows them to then receive the financing for the rest of the development, because there's the pre-sale. And then off the back of that pre-sale, they can actually raise investment. So it kind of works win-win-win. The people coming in, I guess they would be, the first investors. Yes. They're taking more risk, but not as much risk as the developer. They're taking a bit of that risk away from the developer, but it enables that development to move forward. So I guess they must get the kind of best deal of all, and then the next set of development is sold off at a higher price, which is That's where right. the benefit is.
Yeah. Right. I think what we do is we say, look, a development has got a series of risks involved with it. The only ones that a purchaser can really solve for the developer is timing and finance, and obviously the risk of the sale. For a developer, in order for them to actually go ahead after they've bought a parcel of land to develop it into a residential project, is whether they're a large multinational developer or a small developer, the reality is they need to hit a certain volume of sales in order to draw down financing from a central treasury function or from a debt provider. And the only way that they're able to do that is to hit a minimum pre-sales target. What we seek to do is take that early requirement that's required, package up that risk in a certain way, and we use our sort of algorithms that we've created to actually change the profile of that risk so that, you know, what you would normally do as a developer is go to really large investors like institutions and high net worth individuals. What we try to do is break that down into a series of risks that can be sold collectively to a group of buyers via blockchain and different technologies.
Interesting. I'm curious to see what this looks like. So that was me thinking you were going to be talking about the kind of your personal day. But one thing that I just want to go back to was your kind of 3 things around the summary. You said prioritize your day, focus on your day, and strip out anything else that isn't important. Like that was kind of your tip around your daily work schedule.
Yeah. No, I think those, I mean, and also the other thing is I really like to start early in the day because I'm one of those people that struggles to concentrate towards the end of the day. So I'm sometimes easily distracted. So for me, it's all about, you know, particularly in the current environment where I've got 2 young children who are sort of, you know, bowling around the house. So for me, it's trying to, you know, I've got sort of 2 or 3 hours first thing in the morning that I know I can get things done. After that, my time is far less effective because I've got Paw Patrol going on in the background, or you know, an 11.5-month baby that sort of, you know, that I'm sharing homeschooling with my wife. So it's all about making those first hours in the day that are quiet count, because I know that the value of every hour after from a work perspective is diminished, but from a personal perspective is improved.
How are you managing the homeschooling?
We are very lucky in so much as our eldest, I've got a son, Kingsley, who's just about to turn 5 in September, hasn't actually hit, you know, I really don't understand the UK schooling system, but he's not in the sort of school age. So, you know, he's sort of coping with, you know, practicing to write and draw and those sorts of things, and, you know, concepts like volume and measurement and those sorts of things. So thankfully it's stuff that we understand and we can explain. And it's very easy to adapt that to, you know, we're going for a walk on the street. How far is that distance? Or, you know, it's those sorts of things, or what's a word to describe that? I think if they were slightly older, it would be really challenging, because I don't think you sort of really appreciate how difficult a teacher's job is. Just keeping 2 small children focused on doing something that they really don't want to do is actually quite difficult. And when you've only got 50% of your attention because you're trying to do a conference call or a Skype video or whatever it is, it's very tough.
It's tough. Are you developing your training skills, like your teaching skills? Is this a new path for you?
No, I don't think it is for me. I come from a family of teachers. Most of my both my parents were teachers, and most of my uncles and aunties were teachers. So I've sort of learned early that teaching wasn't the sort of career path for me. So it's a good stopgap to sort of deal with everything, but, you know, teaching's not in my future, I don't think.
No. I think you and most of the UK population were kids. All right, cool. A few last questions again. In your environment, so in the property world, are there any myths that you see being either promulgated or that lots of people just kind of adhere to, or any beliefs about your environment that you go, that is completely wrong?
I think, you know, it's an interesting question. I think there's sort of 2 things that I really notice. And it's firstly that because I work specifically in the residential space, and it's quite a sort of technical part of the residential space, there's this belief that your average punter on the street knows everything there is to know about the residential market because, you know, they live in a house or an apartment and they rent one or own one or whatever, but they don't necessarily understand the nuances of the market, which I completely get, and I think it's interesting to be able to try and explain the logic behind some of the ways that the market works to people, because I think it really changes the way that they look and think about things. But I think the other thing is, and I've heard this quite a lot actually when I told people who were quite surprised that I left my senior corporate job to go and pursue a small startup business, that the industry would never change, because as somebody explained to me, a computer will never go and sit down with a client and drink 5 bottles of claret. And the reality is the world is changing. The speed at which the world is changing is increasing every day. And I think there's a real unwillingness, particularly in the property industry, which I think is probably one of the real laggards in adoption of technology. Where they use technology, it tends to be, instead of to completely change the way that technology is applied and change the way that they work, it's to try and increase the efficiency of what they currently do by applying that technology to it. So, our real challenge is to try and show to the market that there's a better way of doing it, and it creates better outcomes for everybody. It creates better outcomes for investors, for developers, but also for the domestic market, because, by us reducing the costs for market access for everybody, it means that there's not as much pure property price inflation created by speculation. And it's just trying to explain those outcomes and what could be achieved through technology.
What message would you have for people? These are just 2 questions. Thinking about leaving their corporate role at this moment in time, or that may be forced to leave their corporate role, in the things that they do in setting up a business. And what message would you give for those that are already in business that may be kind of teetering and thinking, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, what's happening? Would you have a message for either of those guys?
I think for the people that are thinking about doing it, I think it's really important to have a very clear idea about what it is you want to do before you sort of embark on some sort of change. Certainly for me, it was a long process. It was probably 3 or 4 years that I had toyed with the idea and was trying to sort of work out what I could do and how it might work. Because I think as much as you do a lot of thinking about what you might do and how it might all unfold, the reality is the world doesn't quite work like that. Things have got a way of sort of going completely different paths, and really sort of marshalling ideas and people and those sorts of things is actually quite a challenge. So, I would spend quite a lot of time working on what it is you want to do and really speaking to lots of people. And I think one of the things I've learned through this process is the value of the idea is great, but it's nowhere near as valuable as the execution. So even if you've got some amazing idea that's going to change the world in your mind, the reality is don't be afraid to share it, because realistically, it's very few people are prepared to actually go away and do that. So the more feedback that you can get from, trusted sources about how it might evolve will help you develop your idea and go through that process. But, from my perspective, even having gone through the sort of, the uncertainty that we've gone through, I certainly wouldn't change what we've done. It's been it has been a really, really exciting and interesting thing to do. And, it's funny, I sort of almost feel like now it would be virtually impossible to go back to a corporate environment, because you just have so much freedom and flexibility over the way that you operate and what you can do. And, there's something very liberating about not having to sit for hours in, what I would say sort of pointless meetings, talking about how various stakeholders might feel about certain things. We're very much of the sort of opinion that we're going to move very fast. There'll be, we're going to break things, and, ultimately we'll deal with those as we go along.
Yes, love it. Well, I think that is, it's certainly been really helpful to me. I like for me, you feel very inspired, and you're kind of at that peak of the journey where you're like, right, we're in now.
Yeah.
You're in the car. Yeah. I mean, I think you're on the motorway. You're at the start of the motorway. That's what I feel. You're at the start of the motorway, and you're about to press the accelerator in a very in a very fast car. It feels like you're like, okay, we're ready to go. Let's get this going.
Yeah, I mean, we've done this on the basis that we thought that there was a lot of upside, and we've all gone into it thinking like there is no plan B. So we've spent a lot of time thinking about plan A. So let's make sure that it works. And you know, there's obviously going to be challenges along the way, and you know, there already has been so far. But the reality is for every challenge that you come across, it gives you that bit more confidence once you find a way around it. And you know, it's almost sort of constantly pushing at that door.
Will you check in with us later when things are on, you know, when you're literally on the road, and let us know how it's going? Because I'd love to hear how it goes, particularly post CV.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'd love to keep checking in with you. Our sort of plan is to sort of be in market by September formally, but hopefully to do some sort of soft market work before then. So you know, hopefully we can give a sort of an update by then.
How do people get in contact with you?
So the best way is to, I'm on LinkedIn as Ashley Osborne, but also my email address, I think you've got that, which is ashley@devalproptech.com. And I actually quite
we'll put that at the end of the video, by the way. Okay,
I'm more than happy to take, you know, I write a blog regularly I've got my own blog, and I also write on LinkedIn quite a lot. I actually get a lot of people write to me. It's, you know, we're happy to share our ideas and talk to people. You know, we just really want to engage with different people. So, you know, we like hearing from people.
Great, good. Well, I'm rooting for you guys. This is exciting. What an exciting time to start. And they say some of the biggest companies in the world right now started in the last recession. So perhaps this is
maybe this is our time. Time will tell.
Particularly for property.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, thank you so much for taking your time today and giving us some of your wisdom, particularly around the property arena. I'll make sure this is posted with all your details at the end of the video. And thank you guys for joining us today.
Great. Thank you very much.
Well, good one.